Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Co-working Space by Personal Productivity Club. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith,
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
and we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. Today is November 8th, 2021, and this is episode 91. The Fluid Framework brings us Microsoft Loop. And so, welcome to everybody who is watching live. Welcome to those who are listening to the podcast afterward. Of course, each week we review and discuss the productivity and technology news headlines of the week. We usually start that off by going through the blogosphere and the podcastosphere and talking about the articles and episodes that we have heard out there. And so, of course, Augusto, let's get started with our first story this week.
Our first story is an article from Carl Pauline talking about the power of never give up. And I'm going to let you start because I'm dealing with technology. Sorry.
No problem. And so I think this is really good to set goals and also thinking through. It's just a refresher on that concept that if you have kind of an annual planning process, I use a process that I developed over the years called the Reflect plan and act guide, and it's something that I created for myself. And so you're welcome to use this concept, but the idea here is that you take the 30 days of the month, you choose whatever month you want in a year, and each day you reflect on a different aspect of your life, and then you flip it, and instead of the reflection, then you go ahead and do planning in each of those categories of your life. And so whether you call those areas of focus and accountability, whether you call those categories of life or life categories, life domains, whatever those are, I basically go through the process of spending a single day, a few minutes of that day thinking through, how did this past year go? Did it go the way I want to? And I have a set of questions that I've created for myself over time. And then in the coming day for planning, then I think through, how can I make next year both the same for the things that were good, but also better for the things that I want to improve or areas that I want to grow in. And so that reflect, plan, and act guide for me is a great way for me to make sure that I'm not giving up on goals that I've had in the past. And therefore, it gives me the opportunity to really circle back to things where I feel like, oh gosh, I dropped the ball on that this year. Let me go ahead and figure out how to make sure I can push that across the finish line next year. And another interesting tip, I suppose, is that I start my personal year off calendar year. So I'm always working on my projects and goals and my planning starting November 1, which allows me not to get caught up and in the midst of all of the holiday and end of year stuff that happens on the calendar year. And so I'm hopefully ahead of the schedule by virtue of closing out my calendar year before my personal year, that is, before the calendar year. And it gives me that kind of perspective. And my birthday happens to be in November. So I just use that as my own stopping measure and my own starting measure. And it really helps me deal with that kind of goal planning. How about you, Augusto?
You know, I keep mine on regular calendar. I don't make December tend to be less productive for me. The parties, the kids, all this. Therefore, I bake that reflection time in there. That the same reflection time that I know you do in the month of October, I do it in December because, anyways, it's slow. So instead of trying to figure out a different month, that's when I do, and that's when I evaluate the past and what's coming. The other thing I do is I try to make the year 11 months. So I plan for 11 months. December is dead in the sense that there is no big goals in December. Even at some of them, the deadline may be December. The goal really is to have it by November 30. So that way, December is that reflection time, and then holidays and family and kids and all that.
Fantastic. Anything specific that you found interesting inside of the Carl Pauline article? Otherwise, we'll move on to our next article.
Yeah, let's move to our next article, Tackling the Hard Task by Leo Babauta. And he goes to 3 points. Do a small bit of the bigger task, get into the practice of choosing and trusting, and then think of failing as learning. That last one, think of failing as learning, was one big change for me many, many years ago when the first time I came to that and say, oh, that's really interesting. I begin my career in sales, so you fail a lot. So that's part of the fun of that, or not. But I remember at the beginning of that sales career, carrying that burden of the sales. And I had a good sales manager pull me aside and say, well, what are you learning from all this? And I was looking at him like, what are you talking about? There's nothing to learn. And he said, no, there's a lot to learn. So he gave me that push on the mindset, and I just apply it to other things. I think it's Brian Tracy who said, if you have two frogs, eat the ugly one or the larger one first. And if you combine that with my dearest Anne Lamont, who said Bird by Bird, who wrote that incredible book, that's what that first one is. Our listeners have not read that book; they should. But it's a book. It's a story about a brother writing a paper, and his father tells him, "Well, you do that bird by bird. It doesn't matter how many birds you need to cover in the report. You can only do one bird at a time." And it's just that with any bigger task. You can only do one step, one next action at the time.
Absolutely. All right, on to our next blog article this week.
So our next article came from Better News: how to keep your hybrid workforce engaged. And they said hold regular business catch-ups, hold remote after-hour activities, and set up social groups. When I was reading on that, I was laughing at the after-hour activities because I've been working remotely for a really, really long time. It's now over 10 years. And after work activities are okay. Remote after work activities, I have never been a fan of them. I have not understand it. I think there are better things you can do. I had a client that he likes to do these things, but instead of doing it after hours, he do it at lunch, and then he send a gift card to everybody, and everybody comes to this lunch, and you order is a DoorDash gift card, and you order whatever you want, and come to this hour meeting. That works well. I have another client who do a coffee hour, but it's on the middle of the day. I think the remote environment works better when you take that half an hour discretionary sometime in the middle of that than when you are trying to let's make an after hour event. And same thing with the social groups. I have not seen it work, given I dislike Slack and those kind of things who make my phone vibrate consistently. So I may be the antisocial in here, but that has never worked well for me. And I have made incredible friends remote, and I have friends who I have done incredible projects and we have never met. So, or at least in person. So it's not about the remote. It is about the organization trying to force me into the social group that in my experience doesn't work.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the organization, the tight knitness of that particular group, and why the social group or the after hours activities, or or right, whatever the plan is, it needs to be both cohesive. It has to have a mission and a vision behind it, and the people who are engaging need to want to do it. And it's just not easy, right? It's like I have a colleague who works for county government, and every week it's somebody's birthday, several people's birthday at a time, and they all have to go to these birthday parties. And so it's this non-stop cycle of people having birthday parties, and when it's forced in that sense, nobody feels special about it. Neither does the birthday boy or girl or other, right? They. And so none of them feel special. And so it just ends up being this kind of like onerous, I have to show up obligatory experience. And I think in that sense, it can just be better. And so in a remote sense, I think that we all have to be creative, but we also have to have buy-in as it relates to all of these things. And this can't be something where, and I've been guilty of this as the CEO, saying to my staff, okay, go make this thing happen, right? And it ends up being like a fun thing for the group, but because I don't have time to manifest it, I end up delegating it without really having my own say in the matter. And so it ends up being something like, well, it was ordered upon us to do this thing, so we're making it happen. And so therefore, it's not really, there's not really a great deal of affection for that particular thing.
Mhm.
And so I think it really does need to be an all hands on, what is this going to do for us together? Do we really feel like it's going to help create greater cohesion in the team and build upon it? I've had a lot of staff who are remote for a very long time, and we have just decided that we're going to have an annual holiday party, and it's going to be remote. And it's very interesting for me because we're all going to just come into an air meet, and we're all going to have our eggnog or non-alcoholic beverages, and we're going to have a good time just catching up with each other and so on and so forth. In GTD Cafe, which is our GTD virtual meetup inside of Personal Productivity Club, we're going to have our annual holiday party again. Last year it was out of necessity. This year we may have New York City may have a holiday party, but we're not going to be able to do it in DC, and we're not going to be able to do it in Pittsburgh because of the various COVID restrictions and lack of, frankly, the lack of vaccinations, right? And so the reality is that we're still forced to have the holiday party in that environment, and I kind of am looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in a perspective where, one, I'm always usually the host of meetings, right? So I'm on when I'm in these kinds of environments, and it's nice to like not have to be on and being able to interact with the staff. And in this particular case with the GTD virtual meetup, I get to just, have a good time with folks and have conversation, and we can have sidebars. People can join breakout rooms and have one-to-one conversations and then come back into the main room. So it really depends upon the efficacy, the features of the platform you're using for purposes of this. It also depends upon how people know how to use the technology, and then of course the buy-in from the entire group for being able to do so. All right. With that, I think we have covered.
And I think
Did you have-
you make
Oh,
a
go ahead. Go
great
ahead.
point. I think you made a great point on there, and I will stand corrected in here because it is the special part what it is. It is the forced what will turn me off completely. The special part I will enjoy and I will go, because when you mentioned the GTD, yeah, I will go there. I love it. I have done it. It is the force part of that I didn't like.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it feels kind of crummy to be forced into something. Whereas if you know that you're going to show up and see people that you haven't interacted with on a collegial level in a while, or you've had lots of, say, difficult conversations with someone over the last several months, you get to have a reset with them by sharing a drink, even if it's virtually, and just shooting the breeze and having that kind of one-to-one personal conversation, especially in this day and age where, politics might be charged, and you might say, oh my gosh, I can't deal with this person because of their political persuasion, or I can't deal with this person because of COVID-19 vaccination opinions and blah, blah, blah. All of those things aside, at least in a virtual environment, you don't have to worry about all those things. You can still have a one-to-one humane engagement that I think is quite unique today. It's in an environment that is controlled and gives you an opportunity to interact with people. Or you can set aside the other presets to the work relationship and enjoy each other's company. So with that, we have reached our halfway point, just a little early, but we have lots to discuss yet. But we're going to take a break now, have a word from our sponsor this week, which is Co-working Space by Personal Productivity Club. And then when we get back, we will continue on with Anything But Idle and the rest of the show. So we'll see you after the break.
While working in person may be normal for you, it's unlikely your coworkers are as interested in being productive as you are. or working remotely or from home can be isolating. And there's something powerful about being with productive people, even virtually, that helps you be more engaged. If a flavor of these sounds familiar, Co-working Space by Personal Productivity Club is for you. Co-working Space is a virtual work community designed to help members be more effective and efficient in their work and personal lives. At its core, we provide goal tracking and host focused action sessions throughout the week for accountability and camaraderie. Visit anythingbutidle.com/coworking to learn more. Co-working Space lives inside Personal Productivity Club, a digital community for personal productivity enthusiasts, so you can find people who use methods and tools you do too. Again, head over to anythingbutidle.com/coworking to see how Co-working Space can help you be more productive. And now, back to our show.
Welcome back, everybody, to Anything But Idle. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith, joined here, of course, by Augusto Pinaud, and we are here for the second half of the show, and this is our productivity, technology, articles, headlines section. So, Augusto, what is our first technology article this week?
Grammarly rolls out a set of features for the iPad and the phone. When Grammarly came, Grammarly is an incredible tool to help you correct the stuff, but it was challenging to use at the iPad. And you could not use it on Safari. You need to use a different browser that change the identification. Anyways, they came with a keyboard that you kind of start using it, but it still wasn't the best. Now they are finally coming with an editor, and you will be able to use Safari extensions on iOS 15 and going up, as well as the keyboard. And as a heavy user of Grammarly, I am really, really excited about this.
So is this a separate keyboard that now gets enabled in the system, or is this some kind of overlay that basically acts as an ongoing, no matter where you are, editing tool?
So that's what they have before. What they have before is the keyboard, and then you need to go and open. Now you have an editor and the keyboard. So you will be able to use both. So you will be able to open the keyboard as well as the full editor.
Right. So this is like you open up the application and you can edit it inside of the application, which is the Grammarly editor. But then when you go into, say, anywhere else, you're going to have the keyboard pop up, and it's going to help you clarify, correct misspellings, that kind of thing. And then additionally, on the mobile Safari side, you're going to be able to have that extension in the mobile web interface, and it's going to provide that level of correction as well there.
Correct. And what happened before is you only had that keyboard. So you could not use the actual application that, again, it is great, copy paste, but it sometimes required, you use a different keyboard, a different browser, or the keyboard. But the keyboard wasn't great when you were editing a long text. It was good for a text, but not for a long editing. Now they extend the application, and you will be able to get an editor as you get in the PC or the Mac or anything else.
Fantastic. Great to see them, just increasing the footprint of where Grammarly can be utilized, which is ultimately more useful for people who want that level of help and support. So cool. All right, next up.
Google Workspace update, and we're going to be talking about set aside time for focus on Google Time. Most people are familiar with they're having the event and then, being busy, free, or out of the office. And Google now, it's adding one more, focus time. So you can put the title, what you are doing, mark it as focus time, and it give a different notification to the people who you are sharing your calendar of what you are doing. So as far as I understand, it's available for all end users. And there are, at least by now, November 3rd was a release for all users, as far as I know. So by now, everybody should have it. But this is really good that we are starting to recognize that. And I hope that also means that in the structure of the organization, that also means that people are going to start respecting those. I have shared the story many times about my own blocking time and having bosses, meeting. And I have seen it on clients, they have that meetings booked, and people is booking on top of that like there is nothing. So I really hope with this, the users of Google Calendar, regardless if they are in the personal or in the workspace, they start getting more of this, and this gets to be something that is standardized in organizations.
Yeah, so there's a couple of quick clarifications here for folks. This is available to Google Workspace users, and you do have to have Google Business Standard or above in order to have access to it. So if you're in the starter plan, or if you're in Essentials, which is basically the product that kind of takes away the email but gives you all the other stuff, or any other of the plans, and certainly for just standard Google accounts, you will not have access to this. So this is for Google Workspace Business Standard and above. And the idea here is that this is a work environment thing, and frequently what happens is in a work environment, the idea of blocking time out for not being in a meeting for some reason is looked at poorly among corporate, and I don't understand the perspective there. But this is solidifying inside of a major tool that capability. Microsoft has already done this in Outlook, where you can actually block time, and it's effectively saying, I need to do this work. And I talk about two different kinds of work: flow work and focus work. Flow work is the kind of work that obviously instigates flow, from the now late Dr. Csikszentmihalyi. And of course, then focus work are when we're working on actions and we're using basically discretionary time to get into focus to handle those particular actions. I need to work on this project. I need to work on this, context of actions, and I need to get those things done. That's a focus work session. So this flow option, this focus time option, is giving you that capability of saying, in my calendar, this is a blocked out time frame, and it is legitimate work that I am doing. I'm not just blocking out time so I can stare at the ceiling and do nothing. Although mind wandering is actually really good and effective for a lot of people. So mind wandering is not ineffective and not unproductive use of time. It's when it becomes maladaptive, right? When it becomes so severe that you're not doing anything but mind wandering. then we have a problem, right? But that's the idea here. You will see now the chips below your calendar description. And in essence, you can have an event, right? Normally you have an event. And in Google Workspace, you typically will then have now an out of office. You can identify something as a task or have an appointment slot where you can identify different slots and then send that calendar event, and then people can choose among those particular items. A new chip will be added for those at business standard and above, which basically says focus time. You can select that, and then of course now you are putting in what you want to do in that time frame. Really, really helpful. And it gives you all the other features. So you can have, it's basically a meeting with yourself, right? You can identify a room or a location in your organization, and you can describe in the meeting for yourself what you plan to do and all of those other good things. So I think this is a fantastic movement toward kind of the next level of what Google was trying to do with time insights. Remember, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Google adding this time insights capability into the Google Calendar interface, telling you, hey, how are you using your time, and what's going on in your calendar? Now, based on those insights, you should have the ability to say, hey, you know what? This particular time block seems to be open for me, and it's also my BPT, my biological prime time, meaning that it's a good time for me to focus on something very highly important to me. Now you have an option to be able to turn on focus time for that time block and make stuff happen. I'm really, really happy and excited to see this coming to fruition. All right, next up in the world of Google, Augusto.
In the world of Google, so now they are going to allow parents, guardians, and legal representatives to request Google to remove images of those who are under 18 from their search results. And I only have good words to say about this. There's no more than this to the news, but I think it is really recognizable that Google is doing this and really protecting minors.
Yeah, so this has limitations. So there's I support Google in doing this. I think that this is not a true right to be forgotten. I think that there is a legitimate case here for people to have more control over how they appear in the search engine. And there are just certain reasons for it and certain reasons not for it, right? Like you don't want a murderer to come by and say, "Hey, by the way, can you just remove all that murdery stuff about me on Google?" We want to know that the person is a murderer for society's safety. But at the same time, if you're a 13-year-old and you do something, foolish and take pictures of yourself while you're out having fun, and then that becomes something that stays with you for the rest of your life, that's a difficulty. And I think that it's good on parents to be able to, parents, legal guardians, and legal representatives to be able to go out there and make those requests. However, if you happen to have done this already and you are now above age, you're out of luck. You can't go back to Google and say, "Hey, by the way, when I was a minor, I did some really fun things. They happen to not be so kosher for my future employers or even my current employer. Can you go ahead and take those down?" Google will not honor those requests. Right. And to be quite honest, I feel like that should be a part of this. It's certainly for anyone who is a minor, not of majority age, basically in the United States, at least, that's 18 or younger. 18 and younger, or that is under 18, because 18 technically starts your age of majority. But so under 18, you should be allowed to say, "You know what? Everything that happened then, just like expunging your record in a legal court of law, you should be able to just say, "You know what? Everything I did under 18, can you just get rid of anything, certainly images that you don't feel comfortable having been online?" Young men and women, go out there and they share potentially, photographs of themselves that they wouldn't want to show in their adulthood. There's all kinds of issues around child pornography and those kinds of parts that are problematic for people. I think Google should take a step further and give people that capability so that they can protect themselves and also not perpetuate, that is, the continued problems that are on the internet. And the index can do it. We know that they can do it now because they're giving you the capability. And so this is hopefully a step in the right direction. And I laud them for making this step. I also want to push them to go further than that and really give us a true right to be forgotten, at least for minors, and times when we were minor, right? Give us that snapshot backwards and say, "Listen, just under age of majority across the world, let's just go ahead and clean that up." And I think that'll be a good, at least for now, middle ground, right, that we can live on. I still would like to say, "You know what, that picture of me, indexed by Google looks really bad. Can you take it down?" But I get that that's not going to always work. And there is some societal benefit to having an index. And there's, of course, the Internet Archive, and there's other places where things live forever. So it's not like we have the opportunity to get rid of everything. But
Right.
Google, for many people, is the internet. And so we need to be mindful of the fact that because of that index, and the same thing with Facebook, I feel like Facebook should have a right to be forgotten as well, even though, you can go in and delete things. Say you have a child who passes away, unfortunately, you want to be able to gain access to those things and have a fluid process for being able to remove those kinds of pieces of content on their behalf. So it's like, we should just have better systems. I know the technology is new and it's just going to take us time to overcome those pieces. All right. We've got a lot of Google news today. So what's our next Google news item?
News on Google is Google Messages working on the ability to send MMS using Google Photos. So, or MMS videos using Google Photos. So Google, they use RCS. It's the technology they use to communicate, but they're trying to go back to MMS. I'm going to let you talk about this more because I did not understood the movement and why. Knowing that RCS is better, is more secure, why do we want to go to MMS unless we're talking about trying to reach more people in the third world who really may not have complete access to RCS?
Yeah, so this is a factor of what is going to be useful to people in the broadest sense, and so what we're going to see is basically the ability to send better video across MMS via Google Photos. Right now, the way in which we share typically with Google Photos is that Google Photos presents you with a link to the image, and you can go ahead and access that or the video, and you get access to the Google Photos video through that portal, so to speak. And what they're trying to do here is saying, okay, instead of all of the, you know, running around the actual video, we're actually going to send the video itself, you know, over the network. And I'm not sure how this is all really going to work. So right now, I'm maybe I'm getting this confused. Right now, is it the case that they're sending the file over MMS? Is that what my understanding?
That's what they're trying to do, yeah.
Well, so no, my understanding right now is that when you send a video via Google Photos, and I don't have to do it, I have to try it now because I'm confused now because the way it's reading to me is not the way in which I have had the experience. Every time I try to share something with someone, I click on share and say I click on messages, right? When I go ahead to do that, it basically is attaching the file itself, but just a lower quality version of it. So the idea here is that instead of having that lower quality version, I'm trying to find a video now to see what I have here. So, okay, here goes a video. I'm going to go ahead and now try and share that video with someone. Right now in Google Photos, it presents the people in Google Photos, right? So it's trying to share it within the Google Photos environment. And it doesn't even present me with the Messages app. And so now when I click on the Messages app from the share sheet and really force it to do so, it uploads a low quality version of that Google Photos video. What they're doing now is they're basically going to upgrade, and this is my understanding. So folks who are reading this differently, let us know if we're getting this wrong. But my understanding is that they're going to basically upload a higher quality version of it based on a setting. And therefore, that's what's going to go across the network. Now, the better thing to do, in my opinion, is just to basically have it send a link to the Google Photos video so that you get a native, high-quality view of that thing. But if you want to send the actual video to someone, you are now going to be able to send basically an HD, not an HD, but a sharper quality version, as they call it, as opposed to the lower quality version that was being sent before. So that's what I'm seeing when I'm doing this. I'm not quite sure why in 2021 going into 2022 that we're really concerned about this. And I do feel like the RCS component is being bypassed here, and maybe this is a carrier trade-off. They're basically doing some trade-off with the carriers to support something that they're finding is a problem on their side. I don't know, because it's sending a bigger file. So you would presume that they would be doing something to reduce the file sizes, not increase the file sizes. So I'm not quite sure what this is all about. But again, this is showing up in Google Messages 10.4 beta. And so until it comes out in real life, we're not really sure what we're going to see all told. So I'm not really interested in watching MMS video just generally because it's always so bad.
That was my confusion. That was the reason I decided to pick it up, so bring it up to the discussion, because it seems out of the many things Google do to move forward, this seems like, okay, let's move back.
Yeah, it could be that there are people who are having trouble sending it via MMS, and people who want to, right? They're just seeing a class of users who absolutely want to send the video, and so they're circumventing Google Photos by sending it through Messages. I think at this point, I think for anybody who's listening, make sure you're sending it through Google Photos. You're just going to get a higher quality experience on both sides. Make sure they have Google Photos, make sure you have Google Photos, and even if they don't, the link that you send them will take them to a mobile browser window, and it will just present the video in there. Plus, you're not giving them the file, which many times you probably don't want to be giving someone the video file natively. You just want to show them the thing and then be able to disconnect access at some future point. So, all right. With that brings us to the close of our articles this week and on to our productivity resources of the week. And so, as you all know, Augusto and I come across many personal productivity tools, apps, and services in our weekly journeys to bring you the news that is anything but idle. So in this segment, Productivity Resources of the Week, we each bring you one, new or old, we think you might like. And so I today thought I was just, scratching my own itch and was off looking for something. What I was really looking for was actually something that allowed me to be able to download a YouTube video and turn it into a podcast. I did not win that battle. But in doing so, it did remind me of a tool that I do use, which is called Narrow. And I found a competitor to Narrow called Listenlater.fm. And so I wanted to just show you what I'm talking about here. And then if you use it and need it and want it, you can do it also. So here you can, this is called Listenlater.fm. And like I said, I'll show you Narrow in a moment, but this is basically a competitor to Narrow. And Listenlater.fm allows you to basically go in, create a personal podcast feed so that you can add that to your own podcast app of choice and put that into your app and listen to things that you come across. Those could be articles on the web. They could be PDFs, Word documents, and other file formats. It basically picks it up, it turns it into audio, right? It reads it using an artificial intelligence voice, and then it goes ahead and provides that as an audio file for you to be able to listen to later. And so hence the listenlater.fm. And so we go down here, and the idea here is that, and I'm showing this in my account because I'm going to reset this anyway, but there's a Firefox and Chrome extension, and you have an email address you can email to, and a bookmarklet you can put in your bookmark for your browser. There's iOS and text, and there's all kinds of really great ways for you to be able to do this. And you can just get everything into the listenlater.fm environment, which is the podcast feed of choice and podcast app of choice, and then you can just listen to things. So if you come across a really long article, you can go ahead and just turn it into audio and listen to it while you're walking the dog or taking a drive or whatever else. They give you 5 articles for free, and then you can do $36 per year for the whole shebang. Now, flip that, right, to and that's unlimited articles, to Narrow, which has been my app of choice. And what Narrow does is turns your articles into podcasts. And again, you can really only upload, I believe, PDFs, straight text, and then web articles of any kind. So you submit the article to a list. You submit your article through Narrow, and it gets added to your reading list, and then it converts it to your own little personal podcast feed. You have lots of ways to integrate. There's an Android application, iOS application, Chrome extension, bookmarklet, just like listenlater.fm. You have an email address you can email into, and you get to just put it all through. They have over 25 AI-powered voices, so it just automatically creates those voices in over 10 languages. So it's not limited to English only, which is great. And it just allows you to go ahead and listen to that. I really love the dashboard to see how much time it's saved you and how much listening you've done from the Narrow side. And it's just a fantastic, solid application. I've only had a few issues with it, and the support has been great. But as you can see here, you have lots of options for being able to do it. You can even take an RSS feed and throw it into Narrow, and it'll just automatically turn each of those blog posts into a podcast feed. And for me, this is really amazing on like the business marketing side, because if you're really trying to turn your business blog, so to speak, into a podcast, you can easily do that here with Narrow. And you can just basically take that RSS feed from your blog. It automatically generates a podcast from the blog articles. And then, each week you go ahead and just, download the Narrow audio file that's been generated, and then throw that into your podcast app, podcast feed, whatever podcast media host you're doing. It's a very easy way to launch a podcast and get that audio out there to your audience. So, that's not on the personal productivity side, but certainly on the marketing productivity side, it's a really, really great tool for that. So Narrow, just so you have a compare and contrast, they charge you based on the amount you put in, right? So you basically pay based on the number of minutes of audio being changed. And that's where Listenlater actually, at some point, for $36 per year, overcomes your the Narrow pricing, because you're paying as you make your way along. My perspective is that, of course, Narrow is sustainable because they're charging for how much you do. Listenlater at some point will get to a point where it becomes potentially untenable for the platform, because if everybody buys unlimited and then uses it to the nth degree, right, they're going to be unprofitable, and that's going to be unsustainable for the platform. So I'm curious how that'll all work out. Anyway, Augusto, what's your choice this week?
So my choice this week is an application called Liberate, and it was recently selected for Apple. The story is very cool about the developer who developed this, but it's marketed as Liberate, the Black Meditation app, and it's trying to take a different focus into meditation and all this. I thought it was interesting. If you're not familiar, it's a great iPhone app. I believe any help any one of us can get to meditation, it's worth it.
Absolutely. So Liberate Black Meditation app. You can go check it out in is it iOS and iPad
It's
OS?
iOS and Android, yes.
Oh, and Android. Wonderful. So it's across all three platforms, iOS, iPad OS, and Android. Fantastic. Thank you, Augusto. All right. And so with that, that brings us along to our story of the week,
Google
which
Wave.
is
Oh, sorry, wrong year. Microsoft
Right.
Loop.
So this is all about Microsoft Loop. Basically, Microsoft announced a new Office app called Microsoft Loop. You want to start us off, Augusto, with what Microsoft Loop is, or do you want me to tell the story
No,
and
I think I'm
history
going to let you,
Fluid?
because I really, unless I explain Google Wave, I still did not understood. I have read about Loop, and it seems like a problem looking for, or a solution looking for a problem more than anything that is really needed.
Well, it's a modern solution to a long-term problem that everybody has, which is the idea that if we take data and we create structured data, that data doesn't update because it sits there in, let's call it, a local system, right? And we had that with Microsoft Olay, the ability to overcome that by bringing data from other parts of the Microsoft environment and updating it within that document. So you'd open up a Word document or an Excel document, and your Olay component would then go ahead and update to the latest data from the database it was pulling from. And this is kind of like having auto-updated Excel spreadsheets, right? We think about these things from that perspective. Of course, Google Wave is the biggest example of something like this. And of course, it was shuttered by Google, maybe a little bit too early for its time. And Google Docs has attempted to do quite a bit of this. We now see the universal kind of add functionality, the universal insert functionality. When we insert those pieces, that data can stay up to date. And it's kind of like if you have a Word document or a Google document and insert a table of contents, and you just right click on it and say, okay, now update this. Well, that's kind of what loop components are. Loop components are blocks that allow you to go ahead and stay synchronized. If this sounds very similar, it's because it sounds very similar to Notion and the way sync blocks work in Notion. And you'll also note that Microsoft Loop looks a lot like Notion itself as well. But this is kind of the weird part. Loop is recursive. So Loop is an application. Loop components can live inside of other places like Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Whiteboard or other places. But you can also have Microsoft Loop components. Like you can basically have Whiteboard and utilize Loop components on the other side of that as well. So it's like Loop can be either way, like on top of something or underneath something in that sense. The components themselves are available to us, and it allows for this consistent, ongoing, updated content across our ecosystem. So say, for example, Augusto and I were sharing content in a Teams channel. Say we had a shared channel, and in between our organizations, we have a shared channel, and we're sharing a document, so to speak. Well, by using a Loop component, we would be able to have that document in real time through Loop, stay in that feed, and stay updated in real time with us. And that's the power of the Fluid framework that's running underneath Loop. And so I think this is actually a really big deal. To be quite honest, I wish they had just done this in OneNote, but they chose to build a whole new application around it. And
Again,
so, yeah, here we are.
It's not that the idea is bad. No, by no means. It's just it seems like we are adding components to make, Microsoft came with Teams. Teams has been a great addition. And now we are adding components to make it complicated. I understand that's one of Microsoft's skills, okay? But they're making something complicated that what it's going to do is break something that is working really well. And as you said, we have OneNote. We have other components already that can do that really well. Why do we need something new instead of make what we have work? I will not know.
I'll make the argument though that they are doing this because people have a need for it. If I have, if I have data and I want it to stay live and updated across many different places, that's really difficult. And what Loop is doing, or at least the fluid framework underpinning it, with Loop components, I can now say, okay, I have 35 documents, say they're HR manuals for different groups within my organization. With a Loop component, I can now place a specific paragraph of content, and I've got to update it once. And then it updates across all of those manuals immediately. And so we can see that at scale, these Loop components really does provide for an incredible amount of productivity, because we're not now worried about, say, we re-record our training video for onboarding purposes. Well, if it's embedded in places and it's not Loop, I've got to go through I've got to search for it. I've got to find them all. Then I've got to copy and replace all of those. With Loop, that goes away, because now I can say, I'm going to embed this Loop component. And now anytime I change this video, it changes across every other place it exists. And that's an incredibly powerful feature. And it's something that, of course, Notion has brought to bear very quickly in their application, setup, and has been, it's really fluid, and I really like it. And basically Microsoft said, hey, we have been working toward the same thing. We want to give it some publicity. Let's build an entire application around it, because they have the resources to do so. But they're popularizing Loop. But Loop is not the most important piece here. It is actually the Loop components that are think of them just like Notion sync blocks. It is literally that, where you can just synchronize content across a lot of different documents, and it's automatically updated. Think about what we do each week, Augusto, in terms of setting up the agenda for Anything But Idle. Having core components that are the same content, so that no matter what and where we are, that core set of content stays the same, and then we're just adding in the pieces that are different. And if something were to change in the future, I just go and change it once, and then it synchronizes it across all the documents. That's an incredibly powerful feature set that I think Loop components provide us through the fluid framework. And it's something that I'm not going to knock Microsoft for having created. I'm interested, actually, just thinking out loud here, I'm much more interested to see how Apple implements this, because Apple is going to, and they can't sit by and not invent I'm air quoting, invent the concept now. I'm really curious to see how they do it, because they will likely do it more fluidly.
Just for the record, I'm going to say nothing after that, because that's all that I'm going to say.
But with that, any final comments before we close out today?
No, we have announcements.
Yes, there are two announcements, and I didn't add the second one. So go ahead and tell us the first one. And then I'll
the first announcement is on November 17. We are going to be, or the Personal Productivity Club is going to be talking about Prod Chat Live. That's at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the Personal Productivity Club is bringing back the Prod Chat, and it's going to be on a live feature with Twitter and Twitter Spaces. So this is not the first event. This is to talk about it, what is going to be, and show. So join us.
Absolutely. So if you're not on Twitter, you should be. No, you're welcome to join us on Twitter if you just go to twitter.com and look up me, R. Sidney-Smith, you'll find the Twitter Spaces link. And Twitter Spaces is basically a live audio conversation. So it's audio only. And these Twitter Spaces can be recorded or they can be ephemeral. And we also have, of course, tweet chats and Twitter chats, the many years of Twitter chats existing. And the idea is to blend those two together and build upon really the history and the success of Prod Chat, which was the weekly Twitter chat about productivity, personal productivity. And so I'm really looking forward to having everybody come together and really discuss what Prod Chat Live will look like and be. I have my thoughts, and I'm sure many other folks have them. And I'm inviting various personal productivity experts to join and host Prod Chat Lives from week to week. And so, yeah, hope you guys can join us. The second item is that for those of you who are unaware, I'm an Evernote certified consultant, and I'm one of the Evernote regional leaders. And so I'm going to be hosting a webinar on Wednesday. Yes. So by the time this hits the podcast feed, that is tomorrow. So Wednesday, November 10th. And so the webinar will be on Evernote and the extended mind, basically talking a little bit about what extended mind theory is and how the Evernote features themselves, the ones that Evernote has built into the existing Evernote version 10, the latest version of Evernote, really what the context and why these pieces really lean and lend toward the concept of the extended mind. And so hopefully that will help people contextualize how Evernote really is taking over a good portion of how we think beyond our own, personal memory, our own biological memory, and extends it. And I'm really looking forward to sharing that. And so you can register. If you do register, you'll get access to the webinar replay for 48 hours. So just know that if you can't attend live, you can still watch the replay after. There's a 48-hour time frame to it, so you can watch it for 48 hours and then it goes away. And so the incentive is for you to join and watch it. So with that, that brings us to the end of the show. Yes?
Yes, that's it.
All right. Okay, so with that, we've covered the productivity and related technology news for this week. Thank you to you, Augusto, for putting together the show this and every week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
All right. On anythingbutidle.com, you'll find our show notes with links to all the stories, tools of the week, our productivity resources of the week, including some extra stories that we couldn't cover during our time together today. And then our text transcripts. Those come in a readable format. You can click read more. It'll expand it and you can read it right there on the page. Or you can click the link below that, which is a PDF download link. You can download the PDF for offline use as well. After looking at the show notes, please let us know if there's something that's missing. If we missed a story and we want to go ahead and include that, you can do that by putting a comment on the page directly. You can go ahead and tweet or DM us, direct message us at anything but idle on Twitter. You can also use our contact form on the website. So any of those three ways, you'll be able to reach us. If you have a question or a comment about anything we did discuss during the show, feel free to just do the same. You can use our comment fields on the page. You can tweet or DM us, or you can use our contact form, whichever you're comfortable with. And you can also join us in Personal Productivity Club, which is where we have a group dedicated to anything but idle. So if you visit the www.personalproductivity.club, you'll be able to join the group, which is the Anything But Idle channel. So if you go to anythingbutidle.com/community, that'll take you right to a download page, a sign up page that allows you to go ahead and sign up for Anything But Idle. So it's this link on screen, but anythingbutidle.com/community. That'll go ahead and give you the direct sign in page, or if you're already a member of Personal Productivity Club, it'll give you a join option to be able to go ahead and do that. It's free, and you can engage with us in that space if you have questions and other comments, and we look forward to always having you. If this is your first time watching the live stream or listening to the podcast, feel free to subscribe to it on YouTube. Of course, it's just clicking the subscribe button in your podcast app. It's however you add us to your favorite podcast app inside the app. If you've enjoyed spending time or listening to us today, feel free to leave a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or your podcast app of choice if it so allows. Your compliments help us reach more of the personal productivity listening community. And so thank you for doing that. Thanks to those who have already rated and reviewed us. Really, really appreciate your feedback and otherwise. With that, we will see you all next time on Anything But Idle. Here's to your productive life.